Tony Batista was a third baseman who played in Major League Baseball from 1996 to 2007. You may remember Batista for his unusual batting stance in which he kept his body out and open, facing the pitcher before leaning in when the ball was delivered.
How does this guy hit the baseball? Tony Batista. Most unorthodox stance. Yeah. All you little leaguers watching the game, don't try to hit this way.
No, you're right. It works for him, and he starts with a crazy way that he has both heels on the back line.
Seriously, what's up with that? A decent hitter, Batista slashed .251 with a .299 on base and .453 slugging for .752 OPS and .93 adjusted OPS across nearly 5,000 plate appearances in his career. He had a few decent seasons in the big leagues, but is otherwise a forgettable player. His hitting stats, along with his 13.8 WAR, shows he was an okay player but not great. He also never spent more than 3 seasons on a single team, playing for 6 teams overall in his career. Despite a forgettable career, Batista had a unique season in 2000 while a member of the Toronto Blue Jays. It's a season I've described as perhaps the most overrated hitting season of all time. In 2000, Batista slugged 41 home runs and drove in 114 RBIs. In total, he had 75 extra base hits and over 300 total bases. He slashed .263 with a .307 on base and .519 slugging for an .827 OPS, and to go along with those stats, he was worth 2.4 WAR. Over 40 home runs, over 110 RBIs, over 300 total bases, and an OPS over 800 all account for a pretty good season then, right? Well, maybe not. Despite the great stats listed there, Batista had an adjusted OPS of 102. 102! He was only 2% better than average. For someone who seemed like a hitting powerhouse, Batista actually wasn't that terrific offensively that season. That seems unheard of, as 40 home runs and other great stats are a sign of a great slugger. How exactly is this possible for a player to have a solid offensive season and finish only barely above average? Before we answer that question, we need to see how unique Batista's season really is. To see just how much of an anomaly Tony Batista's 2000 season was, let's compare it to other seasons all time. Specifically, in the year 2000, there were 16 players to hit 40 or more home runs. Batista's 102 adjusted OPS and .827 OPS are the worst of them all. In fact, Batista is just one of 4 players that season to hit 40 or more home runs and have an OPS under 1,000. The second lowest OPS among this group was .942 by Ken Griffey Jr., still over 100 points higher than Batista. Ken Griffey Jr. also holds the second lowest adjusted OPS, which is 133, over 30 points higher than the Batistas. He's not just in last place in this group in those statistics, he's being lapped. In fact, despite being near the top of the leaderboard in home runs, Batista ranks 77th overall in OPS among 165 qualified hitters and 94th in adjusted OPS. He was one of the best home run hitters that season, and yet just barely cranks the top 100 in adjusted OPS. What about all time? If we look at every hitter in MLB history to hit 40 or more home runs in a single season through 2022, Tony Batista in 2000 holds the record for the lowest adjusted OPS, period. His 102 adjusted OPS is 5 points lower than the second lowest mark at 107 achieved by Todd Frazier in 2016. Reminder that Batista hit 41 home runs, not just 40. If we raise the minimum threshold to 41 home runs or more, the second lowest adjusted OPS is 113. The difference between first and second is the same as second and 13th. Going back to players who hit 40 or more home runs in a season all time, Batista's .827 OPS is the 7th worst mark all time, and his 2.4 WAR is the 15th lowest all time. For every player to hit 40 or more home runs in a single season, there is a legitimate argument that Tony Batista in 2000 had the worst offensive year of them all. As just mentioned, his 102 adjusted OPS is the lowest mark all time for a 40 home run season. Sticking with that 102 adjusted OPS mark, it's the 12th lowest ever for a player to also drive in 114 RBIs, the second lowest for a player to have at least 322 total bases in a season, and also the second lowest mark for a player to record at least 75 extra base hits in a season. And just for fun, his 102 adjusted OPS is also the lowest for any player to post a slugging percentage of .519 or higher. There has never been a player before or since Tony Batista in 2000 to have such great offensive numbers, only to have such a poor season in comparison. The question many of you may be having at this moment is, how could this be possible? How exactly does a player post great offensive stats, yet didn't have a great season, and if anything, he is just barely above average? The main reason for this is the year the season occurred, 2000. That year was the absolute peak of the steroid era. 2000 set the major league record for most home runs hit league-wide with a combined total of 5,693. So, while 41 home runs is typically impressive, it's a little less impressive when we take into account that several others around the league are also hitting that many or more. Adjusted OPS takes into account the league-wide average OPS. The more home runs someone hits, the higher his OPS will be, so even though Batista posted a solid slugging percentage, so did practically everybody else. The overall average OPS was so high, it lowered Batista's adjusted OPS to near average levels. Specifically, the league average slash line in 2000 was 270 with a 345 on base and 437 slugging for a 782 OPS. Yeah, that was the average. The Blue Jays as a team that season had an OPS of 810, which equates to an adjusted OPS of 101. Given that this statistic also factors in a few other variables, we can see how Batista's OPS of 827 is only slightly above the average. Something else to also note is Batista posted a low on-base percentage of 307, roughly 40 points lower than the average. While he was an excellent power hitter in 2000, he was terrible at getting on base, which drastically lowered his OPS, and by default, his adjusted OPS. Out of 165 qualified hitters in 2000, Batista ranked 48th in slugging percentage, but 156th in on-base percentage. Legitimately one of the worst hitters at getting on base that year. So there you have it. Combine everybody else in the league hitting tons of home runs with a low on-base percentage, and you have a player who hit a ton of home runs, but was about an average hitter. Tony Batista in 2000 had one of the most unique seasons in the history of Major League Baseball. Fantastic hitting statistics, yet wasn't a great hitter at all. It will go down as the most overrated 40 home run season of all time.